Hi there, my name is Pete Woodcock. Now, if you've had a look at my book, Political Theory, A Beginner's Guide, you'll know that I promised in it to give you some supporting materials online to help you get through some of the key concepts in political theory in which I talk about in the book. And this video is the first in, I hope, a number of videos which looks and tries to clarify some of the key concepts which I look at here, which you might tackle in your understanding of political theory. And what I would like to do today is briefly overview positive versus negative liberty, the dichotomy that Isaiah Berlin discusses in his essay, Two Concepts of Liberty. That pertains specifically with regards to the book, chapter 6, around about page 93 to 97, when I talk about Berlin and his critics. So that's what I want to do. So what I want to do, and I'm hoping will just be a few minutes, is talk about what the definition means, what Berlin was doing it, try and unpick it, and try and show why Berlin specifically supported negative liberty. Now, this is going to be the first in a number of resources. So I'm sure you're not new to YouTube, so you know the drill. Like and subscribe, please, and that way any future ones will come straight through to you. So, Berlin defines negative freedom is an individual is free to the degree which no man or no body of men interferes with one's actions. You are free if no one is specifically preventing you, or no group of people are preventing you from doing that which you want to do. Positive freedom, on the other hand, is the ability to do what you want to do. Now, let's just briefly explore this definition. Suppose I want to walk out of the door, and a big person is preventing me from walking out that door, or there's a law which says that I'm not allowed to walk out of that door, then that's an infringement of my negative liberty, because a person or a group of people are preventing me from doing something which otherwise I would have done. However, suppose I'd broken my leg playing football last night, or something like that, and I wasn't able to walk out the door. Now, according to negative freedom, that is not an infringement upon your liberty. The fact that you can't walk out of that door is an irrelevance in terms of your freedom to walk out that door. Whereas proponents of positive freedom think that it's nonsense to talk about freedom about just being external constraints, that you must be able to do something in order to be regarded as being free to do it. The classic example would be, is someone who is poor and living on the streets free to go on a round the world yacht cruise? Now, according to negative freedom, you could have said, well, just so long as there is no law in place that prevents you from doing that, or no one physically prevents you on the gangplank getting on the yachts, then you are free to do it. Whereas proponents of positive freedom would think that it's nonsense to talk about someone who's starving on the streets being free to go on a round the world yacht cruise, because they wouldn't be able to do it. So these are the definitions. Berlin argues that negative freedom is about the absence of constraints, whereas positive freedom is the ability to do something. Now, I think we should be clear about two things here. Firstly, Berlin is arguing that these are two notions of freedom that have existed in the history of political thought. He would talk about John Stuart Mill, for example, as being a classic example of negative liberty, when he talks about Rousseau, maybe Plato and Marx as being in sort of positive liberty. So he's not saying that he's invented these concepts. He's sort of clarifying themes that have emerged in the history of political thought. So he's doing that. And secondly, he's not just interested in outlining two views of freedom. what he does in Two Concepts of Liberty is try and show why negative freedom is freedom. He thinks that positive freedom is problematic because it provides a license to tyranny. He doesn't say that it is in and of itself tyrannical, but it provides a license to tyranny. A bit more of that in a second. So there it is. So Berlin is trying to do two things. He's trying to defend negative liberty, and he's trying to show how these two concepts of liberty have existed in the history of political thought. So let's look at another example, because we've already looked at an example of this. I talk about my ability to play in the NBA in the book, but let's look at another example. I'm producing a YouTube video here. Is someone free to produce a YouTube liberty? And a proponent of negative liberty would immediately look to, are there any laws that prevent you from making YouTube videos? And in some countries around the world, of course, there are laws which prevent free expression and so on and so forth. And that would be an unjust infringement upon someone's liberty. So, you would first look at that. And second of all, would, someone around me physically prevent me from making a YouTube video should I want to do? What constraints are there that exist to producing a YouTube video? Whereas someone who was from a more positive freedom, right, look at other things. Does the person who wants to produce a YouTube video have access to the various bits of kit which one needs in order to make a YouTube video? Computers, editing suites, and so on and so forth. And secondly, can they use them? Are they able to press the buttons, work out how bits and bobs work? So someone who was a proponent of positive liberty would look at other things just rather than the absence of constraints. Now, a minute ago, when I was talking about Berlin, I suggested that he was really defending negative liberty and thought that positive liberty in some instances provided a license to tyranny. Now, why is this? In Two Concepts of Liberty, Berlin outlines how within the discourse of positive liberty, the thinkers often talk about higher and lower selves. Let's look at Rousseau, for example. In a free society, which is a direct democracy with people representing themselves, we are asked to make our decisions based upon the general will. Which is good for the republic, which is good for everyone. And that's our general will. If I make decisions whilst in a position of being a free citizen in a direct democracy based upon what is in my interest, that's my particular will speaking, my amour propre, my vanity. And my higher self really would make decisions based upon what's in the interests of everyone. So there's my higher self and my lower self. Plato, of course, talked about reason should be dominant in the individual just as it's over spirit and appetite. Just as the philosophy kings should govern and reason to dominate in the state, so it should too in the individual. Marx, to a certain extent, talks about ideology, the false beliefs, which makes us feel that we're free in bourgeois society over the actual beliefs that we hold. And Berlin, who is a pluralist, a believer that lots of different belief systems can exist, think that all of these views are potentially tyrannical. And I do say potentially tyrannical because ultimately, if the government can say, or the state can say, or whatever, that if one was following one's higher self, you would believe something different from the way you do today, and couch that in terms of freedom, then it is potentially tyrannical. Individuals should be left free to do that which they want to do as they conceive it at the time. Now, don't get me wrong, proponents of negative liberty, of course, have talked about constraints to freedom being perfectly justified, and Mill's harm principle that under no circumstances should anything be allowed which causes harm to others is a classic example of this. So, for Berlin, negative freedom and see freedom just in terms of absence of constraints rather than the ability to actually do something is a far better way of viewing freedom. So there it is. Have another look, if you will, if you've got Political Theory, A Beginner's Guide, have another look at pages 93 to 97. There's a little activity in there, and I hope that puts a little bit more meat on the bone of your understanding of how that works. So there it is. Like and subscribe, please, because then you'll get future videos, and we'll do a few more supporting activities over the next few weeks and months. Take care, stay safe.